Tyranitar is 100% based on Godzilla. All my homies agree, so it must be true.
No!
What?
How can you say it's Godzilla when bemular exists? I mean, look at it!
Oh yeah, and bemular is one of the most iconic classic Ultraman monsters, and the first one Ultraman caught in a kaiju capsule, Pokeball style. It's what literally inspired Pokemon as a whole. Heck, before they settled on the name Pokemon, they originally were going with Capumon, capsule monsters. But the higher-ups worried that it was too similar to Ultraman, too risky, because it's literally the Ultraman thing, but smaller scale. So they changed it to Pokemon, pocket monsters. But who cares about all that? Tyranitar is totally just Godzilla.
Hey, kaijus are super cool, right? Big monsters and all. Godzilla is the most iconic one, but did you know that King Kong is technically one as well? But while Godzilla made global fame, one Japanese superhero not only furthered the whole concept of kaijus, but also created a number of genres on his own. It's Ultraman. Maybe you've heard of him, as his influence has spread outside of Japan a bit. Plus, I mean, it's one of the longest continually running TV shows on Earth. His size and popularity and well-knownness can be best explained like this. Ultraman is to Japan what Superman or Spider-Man are to the United States. The big, most iconic superhero that just about everybody knows about. And even if you don't know about Ultraman specifically, you likely know his influence. The Power Rangers, it's the American version of the Super Sentai, which are a team of Japanese superheroes akin to Kamen Rider or Ultraman. Ultraman created this whole massive genre, the Monster of the Week formula, the guys in monster suits doing bad kung fu with ridiculous special effects, and Starfish Hitler. Yeah, that was a thing. And perfectly enough, the people behind Godzilla are the same people behind Ultraman and company. I mean, they are essentially the same thing. Dude in a suit destroying miniatures. But anyway, in our last video, I went over what Staryu even is. The answer being one big reference to Ultraman crossed with Starfish Purple. And in that same video, I mentioned some of what this video is about, that being that a lot of Pokemon were inspired by classic kaijus. And we know this because Tajiri said so. Quote, "Everything I did as a kid is kind of rolled into one. That's what Pokemon is. Playing video games, watching TV, Ultraman with his capsule monsters, they all became ingredients for the game. And if you look at the Pokemon they designed at first, they pretty much all fall into one of two categories. Either it's inspired by kaijus, or it's inspired by your typical JRPG enemies.
I mean, you have mimics, tentacle bush vine eye things, fairies, monstrous plants, slimes, ghosts, and the like. It's all very Dragon Quest, very generic JRPG.
But here, we're talking about kaijus. So, Staryu is a reference to Starfish sci-fi tropes mixed with Ultraman himself. But here are some more. Ever wonder what Nidoking is? Well, wonder no more. Here's Baragon, a Godzilla enemy. Not only does he have the same ears, face structure, horns, thorns, is vaguely purplish, and can stand up, but is unique for a kaiju. Most kaijus are either aliens from space, or live in the ocean, or are simply some suddenly mutated creature. But Baragon comes from underground, and one of its abilities is the ability to dig and burrow rapidly. Heck, it's known as the god of the earth. And all that is what Nidoking and Queen are all about. They add the ground type to their previous mono poison, and have many earthen powers, such as digging burrows rapidly. And looking to the other monstrous Pokemon from the first created set, they pretty much are all generic, dinosaur-esque, spiky kaiju things. Rhyhorn is if you mixed a rhino with Angros, another classic Ultraman kaiju, and a large number of kaiju had sword arms, like Gazort or Kamacuras, which is known as the dual-bladed monster, and Gigas is well known for being the first kaiju to actually make Godzilla bleed. So they could have inspired this beta design of Scyther, or later with Kabutops. This is not Scyther. It was green out of the corner of my eye, so I thought it was Scyther. It is not Scyther. Here he is. I have too many plushes. Gamera is another really big kaiju hero, never quite as popular as Godzilla, but not too far behind in Japan anyway, and he was just a big turtle that stands upright. And of course, there's also Turtle Bazooka from Kamen Rider, a turtle with a bazooka coming out of its shell. Blastoise was also among the first Pokemon created. Along with this missing note that looks like a robot kaiju, which is incredibly common. Ultraman, Godzilla, the Sentais, fighting giant robots was a big part of all of these. And later seasons of these shows, you would see the studios recycling old monster costumes, but with some parts replaced. Is robot parts now, turning them into superpowered cyborgs. Heck, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is incredibly iconic. Though, in the end, Sugimori and Tajiri decided against having a robot Pokemon, which is a good call for that early on in the franchise, honestly. But speaking of man-made Pokemon, even the concept behind Mewtwo is a common depiction in classic kaiju films and TV shows. Ew. A majority of the monsters in many of these Monster of the Week shows are created because of man. Heck, Godzilla was the result of a nuclear test causing a lizard to mutate. And some kaiju are purposefully created, either by aliens wanting to invade, or by humans with ill intent. This explains why plenty of kaiju just look like monstrous versions of regular animals. And isn't that what Pokemon are too? Monstrous versions of regular animals. I found the imposter. I mean, take a gander at not Pinsir here. Alright, well, to be fair, stag beetle battles have been a thing in Asia since like the year 700, so of course it's going to be referenced in all sorts of battle-focused media. And so, you can't really say that Pinsir is based on this guy, when really this guy and Pinsir are both just based off of real stag beetle battles. It's not nearly as direct as the constantly rolling around, self-destructing Tekong from Ultraman, clearly inspiring Golem. Did you know that Golem can learn Flamethrower? Like, actually? Let's see, here's another maybe one. A lot of people don't know what Electabuzz is, but like, it's a Thunder Oni. But that still doesn't stop people from pointing to Eleking from Ultraman. I mean, I don't know what Eleking is, but it's not Electabuzz, that's for sure. I mean, similar fur pattern and electric powers, I guess, but that's it. But real quick, I just want to point out how this thing dies. But alright, you're here for Tyranitar, so let's get into that. Most say it's Godzilla, and I'm currently being a pedantic clickbaiter by saying it's not. But really, like, it can be both. Come on, most Pokemon are based on more than just one thing. But still, let's look at some facts here. Just put Tyranitar next to classic Godzilla and classic bemular. I mean, look at this. Some points do go to Godzilla for sure. Its body type is much more triangular, like Tyranitar, whereas bemular doesn't really get triangular until the shoulders. But other than that, bemular is much more green. It's easier to see in the footage here, whereas Godzilla is very dark gray normally, even bluish at times. Some films depict him as greenish, but it's never as saturated as bemular. But even bemular isn't as saturated as Tyranitar, that's for sure, until you get to the toys. Some of those get way saturated. What's Godzilla got? But look at this. Tyranitar has 3 head spikes. Bemular has 2 or 3 head spikes, depending on how you look at it. Godzilla has 0 head spikes. Tyranitar has multiple rows of spikes along its back, the outer 2 pointing more to the side so that they are clearly visible when looking at Tyranitar head-on, and this row of spikes starts right behind the head. Godzilla has 1 dominant row of spikes along the spine and 2 other much smaller ones beside it. Depending on the version, of course. But when it comes to classic Godzilla, head-on, you can't even see the spikes at all. They don't even start until the base of the neck or upper shoulders. Bemular, however, has the multiple rows of spikes all the way down, and those spikes start with the head spikes. And the ones at the edge go primarily to the side. It's impossible not to see those spikes when looking at Bemular head-on. Just like Tyranitar. Oh, but what about this? As I mentioned, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla was super iconic, and this is referenced in Pokemon with its noted rivalry with Duraludon. Where's that in Bemular, huh? The 2011 Ultraman manga introduced Bemular as a much more advanced being in a very robotic suit. It's still got the spikes that you can see from the front, but it's a robot. And here it is with part of the suit blown off. Some creepy angel stuff. Get away. Okay, but what does that make Mega Tyranitar? Some say it's a reference to Space Godzilla, a modified clone with a way huge crystal shoulder spike on both shoulders. Well, maybe. Some folks aren't happy with that answer because it's an entirely different entity. It's a clone. Whereas with Mega Tyranitar, it's literally Tyranitar, but stronger. And so, some look to Super Godzilla, literally a more powerful Godzilla from the oh so iconic SNES Godzilla game. Well, get this. Bemular has an enhanced or empowered form where the colors change a bit and he gets huge horns. Okay, but here's where things get fun. The way the kaijus reach this empowered form is by being granted the power, usually by those who summon or are in command of them. In this case, it was Alien Chaplay, but that's not important. What is important is the way they do this. They use crystal stones called slimtonium, which absorb the life force from those who wear it and store it for later use. In this case, in empowering Bemular, literally evolving it into its enhanced form. Now, where have I heard that before? A crystal made of life energy that can enhance the powers of a Pokemon, monster? Yeah, it's the Mega Stones. Like, literally, all the Mega Stones are made of life energy because the ultimate weapon killed a bunch of stuff. Oh my gosh. What does Super Godzilla do? Oh, it collects S capsules throughout the game and then powers up. Alright. And just to top this all off, Bemular was the first kaiju that Ultraman caught in a capsule, the thing that Tajiri said inspired the creation of Pokemon at all. Literally the basis of Pokemon. What did Godzilla inspire? Like 2 episodes of the first season of the anime? Whoosh. So tell me again that Tyranitar is mainly inspired by Godzilla and not Bemular. Do it.
Ahem.
That sound always means I'm wrong about something.
Love to burst your bubble, but Enhanced Bemular was a thing in Ultraman Orb, a series that came out in 2016, 3 years after Pokemon X and Y introduced Mega Tyranitar.
Oh, is that all? Well, alright. Its base form still looks way closer to Bemular, so still.
Also, what was essentially Beta Tyranitar in some early concept art of Pokemon was a creature named Godzillant. And Pokemon Black and White literally had a Mecha Tyranitar, literally named Mecha Tyranitar.
Well, like I said, things can have multiple inspirations.
Fun fact time, did you know that Bemular's roar in Ultraman is the same exact sound effect as Godzilla's roar, played in reverse?
What? How are they allowed to do that?
It's literally the same people making both shows. They own the rights. Bemular was made sort of as a stand-in or symbol of Godzilla. It's supposed to be similar to Godzilla's power level. It's a way to show that Ultraman is stronger than Godzilla without actually fighting Godzilla.
So, Bemular was inspired by Godzilla.
Yes.
And then Tyranitar was inspired by Bemular.
Sure.
Alright, well, as I said, multiple inspirations. Tyranitar certainly looks more like Bemular, but as a concept, it could very well have started as a Godzilla Pokemon. But being as big of Ultraman fans as Tajiri and Sugimori were, they of course had to throw some Bemular in there too. But hey, since we mentioned shared roars, here's some fun facts. Yveltal's cries in the movie are the same as Megigorus's. Toho is the sound studio that not only does the sound effects for all of these kaiju series, but also for the Pokemon movies. And rather than just make new sound effects every single time, they utilize their massive library. And so, a number of Pokemon have the same cries and roars as the classic kaiju. Palkia, for instance, gets a mixture of King Ghidorah and Godzilla with a bit of a pitch shift. This same sound effect was also used for the Boga in Star Wars. In the Mega Evolution specials, Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre's roars utilize parts of Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah's roars spliced and overlaid on top of each other. Zekrom has the same roar as Megagorus in the anime, and then in the movie it has Baragon's. And Reshiram's roar is Megaguirus mixed with one of Kaiser Ghidorah's roars. Then Kyurem in the movie has the roars of Zilla and Monster X. And Giratina's roar is literally Mothra's, which is fitting because Mothra's evil twin, Batra, looks like this. Oh my god. They didn't stop referencing kaijus in Pokemon, did they? What more do we have? Well, many say that Gigantamax Butterfree was inspired by Mothra, and like, sure, just because it's massive? But like, how can you say that when Volcarona exists? Originally, it had 4 wings specifically to reference Mothra. But that got changed because they thought it was too obvious. But Volcarona's Dex entries mention that it was worshipped by people in the past, which is literally Mothra's backstory too. And, well, they look a good bit alike too. Viras is an evil squid alien monster from Gamera with some psychic powers. Malamar? Is that you? Ah. Aggron pulls a bit from Pulgasari, a Korean kaiju with big horns, a body made of rock and steel, and who loves to eat iron. All very fitting. Just mix some Triceratops in there, and there you go. And hey, I mentioned Palkia, the Pokemon of space already, and I've mentioned Space Godzilla already. How about that? The giant pink crystal pauldrons? The giant pink pearly pauldrons? King Ghidorah is like Godzilla's biggest enemy, a 3-headed Hydra with only 2 legs. And here's Hydreigon, a 3-headed Hydra with only 2 legs. Haxorus has an axe face, just like Destroya. Its name is Destroya, isn't it? Its name is really Destroya? Rayquaza is Manda, and Beta Gyarados is also just Manda, or Larval Mothra. Yeah? Jet Jaguar is Bisharp. Ammonite is Gazora. I am beginning to fall into a trap that too many people fall into, when you really start looking too much for connections when there may in fact be none. I'm sure I've fallen for it septillions of times by now, but sometimes it's just so bad, like... No. Ammonite is just an ammonite. Just like the kaiju. It's just like how there are a few stag beetle kaiju and other such monsters. That doesn't mean Pinsir is based on those kaiju, it just means it's based on a stag beetle also. Anytime I see these Pokemon cross Godzilla connections being made, I see Rayquaza being based on Manda thing coming up all the time, but like, can't they both just be Chinese dragons? You might as well say they're both based on Shenron. It's just as iconic. Rayquaza has so many influences that explain everything about its trio so much better than it's Manda. But clearly, it's Manda is the easiest thing to remember. So that's what gets quoted all the time. Even though they're both just green dragons, like. So while there are, for sure, plenty of references to all this whole influential era of Japanese television, some people attribute too much credit to them, when really, in reality, if you have to come up with a new monster every single week for all 9 of your running monster shows, you're going to wind up with hundreds if not thousands of monsters. And similarly, when you're filling your world with hundreds of magical creatures, Pokemon, well, you're doing just that. And so of course, you're going to find yourself inspired by the same things as the other guys, where there was likely no intent. But some folks will still say, oh, hey, Gigantamax Rillaboom. It's 100% King Kong. King Kong has nothing to do with drums or like plants, but you know, it's big gorilla. 100% King Kong, nothing else. I am very smart for noticing that. And then they go on to write top 10 articles for the internet. Well, I guess the lesson to take from all this is to take a step back and think about what's more likely. Consider what is more likely, more so than nerdy connections of, oh, Nidoqueen is the yellow Power Ranger, but a kaiju. And blue. Well, I guess that isn't the only lesson we learned today. We also learned that bemular is what inspired Tyranitar, and Godzilla sucks.